Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Gordon. I am the CEO of the Women's Foundation of Boston. And I want to welcome you all to the Women's Foundation of Boston Career Empowerment webinar. This is our seventh webinar, and we're really excited about it. I'm thrilled to have you all joining us to learn about the power of the mentor's mindset, which is super important to us, to women, and to everyone in this webinar. So I also want to give you an idea of who the Women's Foundation of Boston is and what we do. If you're not familiar with us, we are a foundation that was founded in 2017. We raise money and we grant it out to women and girls serving nonprofits in Greater Boston. Our mission is to economically empower as many women and girls as we can in Greater Boston by funding programming and projects that specifically help women and girls become more financially independent agents of their own lives. So that's what we do. And part of what we do also is these webinars. So I am thrilled I'm going to hand it over to Lily Mendez, who will be the moderator for this awesome webinar. She is the president of Mass Mentoring Partnerships, which is a nonprofit organization that builds the capacity of youth serving organizations and mentoring programs across the Commonwealth. They do this through technical assistance, funding, and advocacy. Lily brings to Mass Mentoring Partnerships more than 25 years of professional experience in the nonprofit, governmental, and philanthropic sectors, which inform her passion for helping young people reach their full potential by increasing access to empowering youth-adult relationships. So with that, I just want to thank Lily in advance, as well as to all the awesome panelists who you're all going to meet, for joining us today to share your wisdom and all of the information that you're going to give our attendees. So thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and welcome to everyone. Thank you to the Boston Women's Foundation as well for giving us this opportunity to talk about something that we are incredibly passionate about, and that is mentoring. That's about relationships, how we hold each other, how we lift up each other, and also how we are going to continue holding young people, especially at this time. My hope is that you'll be inspired, that you will learn something new, that you will leave this conversation thinking about how mentoring has showed up in your life, how you can develop a mentoring mindset, and how we can continue supporting each other as well as young people, and in particular, young women and girls. So as Christina said, my name is Lily Mendez, President and CEO of Mass Mentoring Partnership. I've been at the helm for 3 years, and for those of us that have been leading through the pandemic, it feels like dog years, and I know my panelists all agree with that. But it has been a true privilege to lead this organization. I want to say, before I introduce these 3 panelists, that I am, and they know, over the moon because I get to hang out with them for an hour. Without saying, these are some of my favorite people. These are some of my favorite people who are doing extraordinary work at extraordinary organizations. Several of you, if not all of you, have been on my speed dial when we talk about being in a relationship, especially during the pandemic. As we've all had these moments of like, how do we get this work done on multiple levels, right? I mean, one is we felt very closely, especially Natalie, Dev, and Lauren, the impact on young people as you took your programs and found yourself having to flex them and change them. And you probably never felt more the responsibility of supporting young people and keeping them connected. And so I always say to youth serving programs, and I said to each one of you, you are truly a part of the recovery, truly a part of the recovery. As young people are coming back out of their homes, or they're expected to go to learn, you're part of that network and that web of support that they so need. And so I know we're going to hear more about that as we have this conversation. So I'm going to, I'd like to introduce folks to Lauren Revello. So Lauren is a program director at EB Kids and has been with EB Kids for 18 years. They provide academic and mentoring services for children and teens beginning through ages or grades 4th through 12th grade. They have 5 different sites around Boston. One is a virtual site, which we're seeing more and more of those services, these services being done virtually. And she runs a mentoring program at Mother Caroline Academy, which is a grantee of the foundation, and supports specifically young women and the young women that are in Motherline Caroline Academy. We also have Natalie Martinez. She's the CEO of Strong Women, Strong Girls, a multi-generational mentoring organization which serves more than 1,200 girls a year in both Boston and Pittsburgh. Natalie has over 2 decades of experience in nonprofit and academic administration. Natalie is a Bostonian like I am. And so Lauren, I know Lauren, you're in Dorchester where I grew up. And our next Boston person is Debray. Deb, long life, entire life in Boston, passionate about mentoring. She's the president and CEO of Big Sister Boston. She brings decades of work experience in management in the entrepreneurial and organizational development, both in private and public sector. I did no justice to these 3 amazing human beings, but I just want to leave our folks with just a little bit, because I want to encourage them to go to your websites to learn about you and to learn about your program. But thank you to all for being here today. So I'm going to kick us off with my first question, which is one that I love in this mentoring space that brings it kind of in a very personal space, which is, who mentored you? And I asked that question knowing that not all of us had mentors at a young age. And so I throw that out there and I open it up for maybe, Lauren, do you want to kick us off and just tell us your story?
Yes, thank you for having me. Really appreciate this opportunity to be able to talk about mentoring and what we're doing at EV Kids and Mother Caroline through this time. So I guess I'd have to start back with sort of a personal story. Basically, I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and my mom, I believe, definitely was a person who mentored me, my older sister. My mother had about 9 children, and I am the last of the 9 kids. And the gap between my sister and myself is 15 years difference. So had kind of a lot of mothers per se in my life, and but strong, influential women as well. So my parents were together for about 30 years, but when I was about 7, they divorced, and my mom moved to United States, not really knowing much about the culture and anything about the US, and just moving, working, and being able to, send for me, basically is what is how we say it. And she sent for me when I was 12 years old and starting school. And then the thing that she really emphasized was education, and how important that was. So I had an opportunity to be able to go to a really great high school. I basically put a lot of work into making sure that I did well and asked a lot of questions. So for me, my mom and my sisters, the importance of education really had propelled me through my career. After I finished college, I went and got my master's degree in education and then in social work. So all of these things have come together to kind of like form who I am today and what I do. But there were also other people along the way that came in that saw a need in me and was able to offer resources and support. They would say stuff like, I think this job would be great for you. Like, I think you would be good at this job. So those little tidbits, those little passing moments of people who I had already admired in such fields that I was interested in, also reflecting that they thought that I would be great at it. And so those are the type of things that sort of helped to lead me on that path. And not only that, but they just also followed up with me, just checking in. First day of work, how's it going? What have you been doing? And so that was also very important to me. So I think mentors come in different places and different ways, but very much needed in our lives as we go forward.
Thanks, Lauren, for sharing. And thanks for sharing your personal story. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about how that informs your work as well. So how about you, Deb? Would you like to go next?
Sure. Thanks, Lily. And I just want to say I really appreciate that we stayed connected during the pandemic and we didn't let, the fact that we were isolated isolate us. And that emotional connection meant and means a lot to me. So thank you.
Thank you.
So when I think of mentoring, I think of attention, right? It's giving somebody your attention, right? And it's showing that you care enough to really listen to them. And it's a gift, and you know it when somebody's really listening to you and they care about what you have to say. And I think we all can be mentors and that we all need to be mentored. And so when I think back on my youth, I can't help but think about all the women who took an interest in me. It was like my friends' mothers. Certainly, I think about my fourth grade teacher who just cared about me, and she just kind of singled me out and I thought I was special, right? And then it was a boss later on who gave me sage advice, and then colleagues who listened to my challenges. They're not there to really solve my problems, but who actually care and ask questions. And I think that curiosity without judgment is about being a mentor, right? They're curious about what's happening in your life and they're not judging it. So when I was a child, there was this one special person that comes to mind. So I grew up with 5 older brothers. I didn't have any sisters. Parents were both, I won't say in over their heads, but they had their hands full. So just like any child, I did want attention. I think all children want attention, right? So even if the phone would ring, those landlines, and you'd all run to the phone, hoping it was for you, I would run to the phone, be the first one there. And then, if somebody were asking for one of my parents, they'd say, is your mom home? And then I'd, mom, whatever. But when one aunt would call, she would always take the time to talk to me first before she talked to my mom. So she'd ask me questions. She remembered what I'd said in the last conversation. She was curious about me. When I'd see her later, she would follow up. And that really made me feel like I was a special person. Like, she shed light on me. And I believe that is really what it's about, right? It's that you're building a relationship with somebody, and it's in relation that you are a mentor, because you start learning about the person and then the trust is built. And once you have that trust with another human being, whether it is a 4th grade teacher, whether it is a boss, whether it's a colleague, and then that's how I think both the mentor and the mentee grow, and there's growth in the relationship, and there's that light that begins to shine, because we all have the ability to reach our full potential, but we all need that somebody to show us how to.
Awesome. Thank you, Deb. How about you, Natalie? How did mentoring show up for you?
Well, thank you, Lily, and the Women's Foundation of Boston for this opportunity to talk about this really important subject. So my story is probably a mixture of Lauren and Deb's story, actually. So I'm glad to have heard their stories first, and happy to share how mentoring has happened for me in my life. So I am the youngest of 3 daughters, and was born and raised in Boston, as you said, Lily. And I grew up in Mattapan, and both my parents raised me and my sisters, and we were like in a single family home, and not necessarily middle class, certainly not in poverty, but not in middle class. And so my whole life I was just my father was a Marine, and, so pretty strict about rules in the house. And my mom worked, to provide for me and my sisters. And then my 2 older sisters got married very young, when I was, in my early teens, and moved out of the house and went through some different challenges in their life. And so I felt like by the time it came to me, my parents were burnt out, and kind of was like, get a high school education and figure it out at that point. And so much of my younger years, I was aiming towards going to finishing high school, and really didn't have any direction or focus after that. And so it was when I encountered some people in my high school that were like, you need to go to college and so forth. And I started off at college post high school. And then from there, wasn't able to finish, which is, the case with a lot of young inner city people for financial reasons and other reasons, and had to come home and then entered the workforce. And then after I did that, I ended up having 2 daughters, who I'm very proud of, but my life started going down a road that wasn't necessarily leading towards success. And when I had my second daughter, I decided, what am I going to do to provide for them? I hadn't finished my education. And so I wanted to go into event planning. And it was at that point that I got a job at an organization where I was going to be planning events for some major donors, so some pretty affluent clients. And my boss at that time took an interest in me, and she saw the potential that I had, and said to me very frankly, in order to provide for these beautiful girls that you have, you need to get an education. And I'm a woman of color. And she was like, even the house that your parents have, you cannot afford that without an education. And then she went on further to say, and you need to figure out how you're going to show up in this world, as a woman of color. And she's not a woman of color. And I thought that was pretty bold of her to say that to me. And at the time, I didn't know that it was a mentoring relationship. We have grown, it's been 20 years now. She's one of my favorite people, but she was one of the first people to really see potential in me, breathe in me, and, encourage me to look beyond my current situation. And so I went on and I finished my education. And then from there, I decided, and I'll get into this more later, but then from there, I decided what I wanted to do with my life. And ultimately, I'm here at Strong Women, Strong Girls because of mentoring relationships. But what I want to say about my first mentor is that it came organically, and it came from a place of really seeing in me what I didn't see in myself. And that's really what the mentors in my life have done. And the other thing that I want to say about like other mentors that continue to mentor me. So I've evolved over the last 20 years, and I have different mentors in my life now. And these mentors are more intentional. I seek out mentors. I have professional mentors and personal mentors. And so that's how mentorship has started and showed up for me. I didn't even know what a mentor was when I was growing up. I wouldn't even know to seek it out. And I cannot end without saying, of course, my mom is my true mentor for life, but she's my mom. So I think of her as my strength and my rock. But now that I understand mentorship and the power of it, I'm able to speak to it as it relates to my mom, but others have showed up in my life in different ways.
Thank you, Natalie. And thanks to the 3 of you for, frankly, your generosity in sharing your personal story, because that is a gift you give us to when you share that level of vulnerability. So what I'm hearing is that, there's people tend to confuse sponsorship with mentoring. So sponsorship is usually like in a professional space, someone just looks at you in a very sort of from a professional point of view. They may invite you into meetings or introduce you to somebody else and maybe in a position of power. Mentoring, as you all know, and we all agree, is a little bit deeper than that. I mean, I would say at the most basic level, the person takes, like you all said, takes the time to discover who you are. They take the time to cultivate your abilities, to shape your own lives. And they also, enable you to engage and contribute to the world. So so it's a much deeper kind of relationship. And especially for young people, we know that the most effective mentoring relationships tend to be sustained, tend to have, some sticking power. And by sticking power, Deb, you and I know we're not talking about 50 years. We're not talking about 50 years, but we're also not necessarily talking about it being sort of just one and out. That's a different type of relationship. And some would argue maybe under the umbrella of mentoring. So tell me something about the work that you're doing now. The world it cannot be overstated. I wish it were overstated to say that our work has shifted enormously. Not only are you're bringing yourself to your work. I happen to know that all 3 of you are like super passionate about the work you're doing to support these incredible young women. You're giving what was given to you, and sometimes you're giving what was not given to you, because sometimes we give what we didn't receive out of just appreciation. So You've had to pivot your programs virtually. Our work is about staying in relationship. How has that shown up? Lauren, do you want to talk a little bit about how that's, now that you're working with all these young women under these conditions?
Yes, definitely. Thanks for asking. So our program definitely had to pivot. When we first found out about COVID, we basically had to drop everything at Mother Caroline. And I was like, should I take everything with me? I don't know if I'm coming back. I had no idea what the pandemic was all about. But just in that, exiting, we decided immediately that we were gonna go virtual and continue the year. So our board just was amazing, and they were like, we're going to pay for Zoom. And so just figuring out platforms and figuring out everything. But my staff, so amazing. Everybody came together and had some ideas, and we were, at that time figuring out how we're going to support our families. What are we going to do? So I think during that time, originally, there was a lot of information that was given out. So basically we became an information hub where we were sending out information to families, like here's how to get lunch, and how, you need food, what do you need? Here's an attorney service if you need it, if you're getting evicted. So just trying to get out into the community and being able to support them, and letting our families know that we're here for them. So that's something that we did originally, and then providing families with internet service, if they needed internet, because kids now had to be at school and be online, and also just trying to get some grants and things like that that will help support families that needed it, specific things. In the meantime, the tutors were also amazing, and they were all just like, yes, sign me up. I want to meet my kid. I want to continue, as you mentioned, Lily, relationship, and all of you talked about relationships, how important that is to maintain and to hold on to. So what we do at EV Kids is we try to get tutors as they come into college as freshmen, and hold on to them for their entire year with one child. And so they do one-on-one weekly with that child. So they already had a built-in relationship, which was a plus for us. And the fact that we were also connecting with families and talking to them on a weekly basis. So it was easy to pivot and call family and said, when could we do this? What time works best? And all of this. So also bringing in family input, families mentioning, what, I don't know if I want my kid to be, online, like they're in school all day online, like maybe we can shorten our sessions. So then EV Kids Pivot, we shortened our sessions and made sure and had a built-in time to do a check-in question with each other, so that relationship could be maintained. We figured out how to do online games together, as well as working on some academic things, maybe math and English, instead of working on some of the other subjects, just shortening everything. So we did have to pivot, but just being there, listening to everyone, what they needed, and being able to, to supply that and help support them along the way. So, and we're still here, we're still checking in with families. This year, we may be doing partial in-person and online. We've even developed an EV Kids online platform, because we're like, hey, we can continue these relationships even when a college student moves abroad, or if they move away, the kid is still here, the kid still needs some support. So we were able to do that as well. And our college success program also started doing college hangouts with our college students. So basically those are kids who are alums of the program. They're now in college, and we've formed that program a couple of years back because our kids were not completing college. So we'd get them to college, but they wouldn't stay. So, we have a wonderful person who's in charge of making sure that those kids continue and their financial aid packages and everything gets support around that. But mostly we do hangouts to just check in with them, see how they're doing, and what are some of the resources that you could use at college. So Yeah, we've looked at it pretty much in a lot of different angles and really trying to figure it out. And I have just working with a great staff and also board members who are ready to just be like, yeah, let's jump into that and see how that works. So that's our story.
Excellent. Deb, tell me, we've talked about.
You know, how much
Yeah.
time do I have? No.
Right.
So Lauren, I love that you said information hub, because that's what we all become, right? Because all these families, big and little sisters, families, they're looking to us, right? So we all had to do that pivot to make sure we had the technology, that we could figure out the programs, and we did that, right? We make sure big and little sisters can still communicate, and they can do it through either FaceTime, they can do it through Zoom. And then we made sure that we were training the big sisters, continue to do everything that we were doing, but do it virtually, right? Everything. We figured it out. All of us got together, boom, got it. We even came up with sort of a tagline: physical distancing doesn't mean emotional distancing, right? So we're doing it, right? We've got all of that going. And then what? Well, we're talking about people, as you said, Lauren, we're talking about relationships. And so there's all kinds of things, because for big sisters, many of them moved home to be with their parents, right? They moved out of the city. They were going to college, the colleges were closed. So we had a lot of those big sisters, as I'm sure, same with Strong Women, Strong Girls, they left the city. So we still want them to stay connected. The schools were closed, the school-based program, it's all those layers, all those people that need support, emotional support. So it's not just the big and the little sister that need that emotional connection, it's everybody else. And I will say, if I look back, we're still in it. It's still the emergence of the post-pandemic, and we're not even post-pandemic. And there's a lot to say about that, about the re-emergence that we're going through. But that whole saying of, physical distance doesn't mean emotional, distance. I'll say that is not necessarily true. All right. We resisted, I want to say, e-mentoring the whole time I've been a big sister, 15 years, resist it, because we believe that it's in person that you build relationships, that there's no substitute. And we also know right now, because we've experienced it, that girls do not want to look at themselves all day on Zoom. They don't like to be the center of it. They don't want to see themselves, right? And they have to turn their cameras on. And so now they're so focused on themselves, they're not listening, they're not learning. That learning loss they talk about, that's self-esteem for girls, right? That they're losing that self-esteem. They're not thinking they're good enough. So this is layer that on. And then the biggest one of all is staff. And I, not being self-deprecating here, I'll just say this. Leadership is difficult virtually. I am not a virtual leader. I'm not a remote leader. And I don't mean I'm a hands-on sort of leader. I'm a personal leader. I'm one that likes that connection, that likes to walk around the office, that likes to have those chats, that sees somebody's look on their face and say, hey, what's up? It seems like, are you okay today? Checking in. Well, guess what? In this past year and a half, as we all know, people need that check-in. I could check in on Zoom, right? I can have that one-to-one, but that's not the same. And it's been extraordinarily difficult, I'll say personally for me, as a leader, to maintain that emotional connection in a way that strengthens relationships, long, strong relationships. We know this. This is what, this is about self-worth, but women too, for staff, for everyone, not just women and girls, but men too. But it's the self-esteem for girls that this is what we base it on, relationships. So it's been very difficult, Lily, as a leader. And I know you want maybe talk about this, but it's not just the pandemic. It's the economic, it's the racial issues, being anti-racist and what that means. It's all of it, having layer after layer as a leader to ensure that you are addressing it all for staff who are feeling isolated and alone themselves, who are dealing with issues that we're all dealing with, but a lot of them might be doing it in isolation. And then they don't have the connection with the leader and the way that they need it, or the way that I need it, to have that real strong relationship. So not to end it, it's not ending it, it's learning as a leader as ways to connect in a way that keeps that emotional connection strong. And it's been very difficult.
Deb, I so appreciate you lifting it up and just saying it. And I know Natalie's got a lot to say about this because her and I've had these conversations as well. Leading at this time, well, first of all, what you brought up about the impact of this virtual world with young women in particular. So that is a point that I do not want that to get lost. And part of what we're going to be dealing with, or what we're dealing with now, is the trauma of the experience of coming out of not out of the pandemic, right? Because what's happening
Exactly.
is that what's happening is that we are all in this rush to get out of the pandemic, but we're still in it. And so young people are now expected to go back into the classroom. They're expected to make up for the last 6 to 7 months. And and we want to pretend like the world has continued and it's normal, and it's not. And it's not.
It is not.
And
right.
I want to lift up what you said also about, and Natalie, please, jump in about leading during this time. And especially, Natalie, I've had conversations around responding to supporting young people during the pandemic. Then this powerful conversation about racial equity is at the forefront. And we as leaders feel very responsible to address our practices internally. But then on top of that, Natalie, we're women of color leading.
Yes.
So it's like this kind of like, what is it? Physician heal thyself, or whatever that term is. So Natalie,
Indeed.
you want to
You're channeling so many parts of me right now, Lily. So not to belabor the point, the first thing I want to say is absolutely 100% we are not out of the pandemic. We are in the thralls of what I think is probably the middle of it, or moving to the middle of it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because because we're no longer quarantining, because we're opening up, and we're trying to figure out a new way to live in this world. So it's like, I told my team, which I have to give so much credit to, because they pivoted at Strong Women, Strong Girls within 2 weeks, to finish out our semester and then figure out how to get us virtual for the upcoming semester once the pandemic hit and we all went home. And so, smart, amazing women did that. But then, everyone was doing the same thing. Everyone was home and behind the screen and not sure what the world was going to look like and if we would all survive it. And so therefore we were working, in that same mindset. And then we all know what happened. All of a sudden it's like, we're vaccinated and we're not vaccinated, and we can open up or we can't open up. And there's these divides. And now we're in a world where, frankly, from our program, offering in person, offering virtual, and then now thinking about a hybrid situation. And what Deb said is absolutely right. Our program works best in person, but we're in a situation where no one has figured out how to do this. No one has figured out how to open up. And we are required or wanting to meet the needs of our women and girls, and therefore having to figure out how to show up and meet those needs, not only from an emotional standpoint, but just from a technical standpoint. I've written more policies around what you're supposed to do in COVID. Do you require masks? Do you not require masks? And we can't even get into paying attention to what's important in the mentoring relationship. One of the things that I want to highlight about what we're trying to do and what we're working towards is what came out of being virtual, 100% virtual, when everyone was shut down, is that the girls are in desperate need of that relationship. And so it began to show up in our surveys. It began to show up in terms of them coming into program. Almost all of them, like Deb said, were not turning on their cameras, because whether it was the age demographic or just being inundated with this scary world where they can't see their family or their grandma or their minister, or they can't go to Sunday school, or they can't do much of anything. And so what we realized is that emotional connection, we were racing against the clock to figure out the technical side of being there for women and girls. But then the relationship side of it was really taking a hit, because we're doing this with the same resources. So it's not like we got an influx of staff to help us figure this out. And then on top of it, and we work within Boston Public Schools and other community centers. So then the school district is trying to figure it out. And then, requiring certain things of us as out of school time programmers. So I know that I've said a lot in that short period of time, but really what I'm trying to get to is that And from my opinion and where we're coming from as Strong Women, Strong Girls, I'm telling my team, I'm signaling to the college mentors as well as to our girls is that we're in this together. We're still figuring this out together because it's not over. It's at the point where we got to get in the think tank together, and we have to have humanity towards one another, because it doesn't mean that my program is perfect or the next program isn't perfect. When we go back to the topic of this conversation today, which is mentorship, it's about seeing the person where they are. It's about building that relationship and knowing how to move to the next, to the next phase for that person's life, or in society in general where we are. So I just feel wholeheartedly, and what keeps popping in my mind, Lily, that I didn't touch on is the leadership aspect of it. Our college mentors and working with college students is phenomenal, but they were and are passionate during this time, whether it was the racial reckoning or having to do with some of the other issues that are coming up politically around, abortion rights and things like that. Channeling that energy in a virtual setting has been challenging, and we love the energy from the college mentors. They are our future. They are the people who are going to make change for us. And so that's also been something that we've really been trying to deal with, is all of the different priorities that are coming up for the people that exist in our program. So again, I can only encourage us all to just lean in together, text each other. Like you said, Lily, grab that glass of wine and just try to be in this fight together as we try to offer more services to women and girls.
Thank you, Natalie. And I, like I said, I love your passion around this. Help me here with this. I get a little frustrated. I'm putting myself up. I'm gonna pull a Deb. I get a little frustrated when, let's say pre-pandemic, people would talk about relationships as being some sort of like nice to have, soft skill. That mentoring was like, hey, it's just a nice thing to have, but we really want to be focused on, academic achievement, want to be focused on attendance, which, not saying that those are not important things. However, during the pandemic, agree or disagree with me, we were talking about isolation. We were talking about people feeling disconnected. We were talking about young people, adults not being seen, literally disappearing because there wasn't that network around them. You talk to me about that, and does that fire you up as much as it fires me when I hear things like that?
Fires me up, but I do think it has to do with gender again. I don't want to always do this, but let's face it. We know the importance of relationships, right? We know this. This is how we lead, in collaboration and teamwork. We know the importance of relationships to make change. So we run these organizations, and it's about mentoring. It's about relationships, right? And to get sort of that people to listen to us is hard. So we are experiencing exactly why we could talk about funding. We could talk about why there's, the Women's Foundation of Boston exists. I mean, there's a reason they exist, right? So it's that it doesn't get the traction. And now, even with saying, Lily, isolation, these girls are saying it. I'm sure we probably all saw, because I'm still in the paper, still reading the paper this morning. I'm just going to read this one thing, okay? You don't mind, Lily? Mm-hmm. So it says, as the country continues its gradual reemergence from lockdown, some young people are grappling anew with the disorder of social anxiety, encountering newfound insecurities, a fear of public spaces, and a reluctance to hang out with friends. The result has been a harmful weakening of their socializing muscles, underscoring the pandemic's potential long-lasting effects on the mental health of a generation. And we know that what mentoring does, showing up, listening, caring, absolutely being there for another human being makes a difference, right? How much evidence do we need now? How much, Lily, to say the importance of what we do and the importance of being in relation to a child, to a youth, to an adult? It is critical to society. It is, and we have known this for a while, but I just feel like a lot of it has to do with gender, unfortunately, because we're the ones putting it out there, saying how important it is, right? And we're not getting the dollars in because they want to see, oh, social emotional, let's see the impact. Let's see those numbers. Let's see, and getting back to that, come on. If you're a parent, if you're an adult, you know the importance of listening to a child. There's no way, ask a parent, a father, anyone, and say, if you didn't pay attention to your child how would they be today? Right?
Yeah.
It's attention. It's the caring. I will get off my soapbox, but you told me to go on there, Lily, so I went. But of course, you're right.
I love it. Natalie,
Well,
Lauren.
if I could double down just a little bit on the mental health right now, especially, I mean, we're in the space of women and girls, but let's talk about it in general. Like, there are not enough resources out there to meet the needs of our community. And what I'm seeing is that girls in particular the statistics tells us, right? So, and we talk about it as strong women, strong girls. The confidence drops by 30% by the time they're age 14, and it doesn't recover like it does for boys. And then when you ask girls what confidence mean, they usually says that it's usually what self-esteem means. They say it means that they are confident. Whereas boys, if you ask them about self-esteem, they say it means that they can do anything. And so at Strong Women, Strong Girls, we're challenging girls to believe that they can change the world. And it's a big vision that I have, which I'm trying to get across to everyone, all of our stakeholders, but truly. But so when you take that concept and how confidence and being disconnected and showing up in the world for girls, and then you put it in a place where they're isolated, you put on top of that what they're seeing visually on social media and other ways that they're engaging, you're creating an environment where girls are not going to thrive. The social emotional learning and asking for outcomes and so forth is not getting to the heart of what's challenging these girls. We're going to talk about women and girls today mostly, but challenging these girls to be able to look beyond their circle right now, which has shrunk down to nothing. They are literally sitting behind a computer. And then even my daughter, who is one of the most social girls that I know, was terrified going back into school. It was almost as if she's been in the school since 5th grade. I'm like, it's the same exact people, but it is showing up for girls and it's showing up for the kids in a way that they no longer are able to go out and be a part of society confidently in the way that they were pre-pandemic. And so we don't have the resources or the answers to be able to meet that need. And that is what is a real challenge. That's where I actually challenge our lawmakers. I challenge those that are in the field to get out there and help these young people, because the fact of the matter is if we don't, those long-term effects that was in that article that Deb mentioned is going to be astronomical. It's going to impact our communities in ways that we can never even imagine at this point. So the passion, I have true passion for that and how we can help our kids.
Thank you. And Lauren, I know you wanted to, thank you, Natalie.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I see all of this stuff as they're touching upon, kids and mental health, just, talking to parents and them worrying about their kids going back to school. And a lot of them don't have teachers of color. And so parents asking me, who's gonna talk to my kid about things when they come up in school. There's not a lot of role models in school, and so just listening to their concerns and kind of talking to them about what's happening. I know that the school has provided a social worker. They actually brought in a social worker and a nurse to kind of support that. But there's so much, some of these kids have lost their grandparents or people that they know who live probably in their home. So they, were close to them or had to go to grandma's house because mom had to work. A lot of our families, frontline workers, they had to get out there. They had students who were basically afraid for their parents, my mom has to go to work and I'm worried about that. So a lot of it was a very hard time for our families and our kids, and just hoping to be there in the best way that we can. We all know that in person is best, where you get that one-on-one and be able to see how they're doing. I always talk about a story of one of our tutors meeting her kid for the first time. The kid started crying and the tutor's like, what's going on? And basically she had she couldn't finish an assignment and was worried about not being able to do that. So just having the tutor take a walk with her and you know, get to know her. So those little opportunities that you would have in person, you know, is not there. And definitely we have to do something long term. I don't know how this is all gonna turn out. We think we are, you know, we're working towards the best that we could do as far as in-person and virtual, setting things up, cleaning up the sites. We're trying to do our best. But just this morning, just reading an article from Harvard Business School that 95% of their students are vaccinated, 98% of staff, but yet they're going online because there's been breakthrough cases, lots of breakthrough cases at the in their university. So it's like, even if you're vaccinated, there's like so much risk still. So not sure like where all of this is going, and people giving us so much different information about boosters coming up, like take this, don't take it. Like there's so much misinformation and not really understanding it. And working with people of color, they have a lot of like, you know, health issues that get in the way, and they're afraid of taking the vaccine. I know my family in Trinidad and Tobago, they're deciding not to take the vaccine because, again, they have a mistrust of like the whole system. So who knows where that's going to lead if, you know, parts of the world, they're not vaccinating, and then the rest of us, we're told to, you know, this is important and we're doing it. But, you know, the virus started with one person or so in China, and it spread throughout the world. So obviously a lot of concerns, a lot of you know, things that we're still trying to work out, but trying our best to be there to support our kids and families as much as we could.
No, thank you. And I think, you know, I would tell my team, and I think Deb and Natalie, I said, you know, please don't ask me to be the CDC. I can't read the guidelines, but I do know that what we are sitting, the one known is that it is rife with anxiety. So whether I agree with you on what the causes are or what the solutions are or not, we're still living in a space where people have high anxiety, and young people have high anxiety, obviously. I know that one of the things that Natalie and Deb, at your organizations, in response to where young people, the challenges that has really risen to the surface, especially around racial inequity in general, both of your organizations have taken steps towards looking at public policy. And I think, you know, and I celebrate that your leadership, because we can't sit with young people and hold them accountable for structural issues that are without their control. And so I always tell our youth serving organizations, I'm not trying to turn you into a think tank. However, you know, as leaders in a community, you know, what can we do in order to address those issues, either through public policy or so forth, that that can lessen a bit of the burden that our young people have to find themselves in. I mean, there's a reason why food insecurity became at the forefront of the pandemic. There's a reason why housing insecurity became, you know, super apparent. But so I wanted to just celebrate that. As far as, and I want to encourage folks, if they have any questions, please, we have time, just put them in the chat. These are all amazing programs. So we'd be happy to answer any questions. I wanted to go back to the whole, you know, mentor mindset, the whole, what we call it, mass mentoring web of support. I would, you know, I'm a big fan of driving volunteers, yes, to all of your organizations, because I know that, you know, you could use more and more and more. I also believe that all adults, frankly, should develop a mentor mindset. And so we do a lot of work with school systems. And I will say during the pandemic, we had school systems come to us to frankly help their teachers and their staff be prepared to, like you said, Lauren, to see that young person struggling with perhaps an academic subject, but to take the time to walk outside, right? I mean, and it's the Search Institute says 5 things: express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, and expand possibilities. If that is something that every adult can be mindful of when they engage with the young person, especially at this time, and especially express care, wouldn't that make an extraordinary difference in the lives of young people and frankly in the lives of our community? Oh, someone said, can I say it again? Sure. Express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, expand possibilities. And the beauty of that is that applies to young people, but it applies to all of us. It applies to us as women in the workforce. It applies to anybody that comes into your life. Just those 5 things would make an extraordinary difference. And I love share power because, I'm a big one, like, share power. If you got it, share it. So I don't know. And the other thing I want to say, Deb, one of the things that you're in your website, you talk about create a mentor-rich community.
Yeah. I'll just respond by saying that what you just said is so critical, is that a lot of people think, and this, you need special skills to be a mentor. Like I am not ready in my life to be a mentor. People will say when I ask them, about being a big sister, they say, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that. I said, can you listen? Can you show you care? Do you, go through that? And as you say, expressing that care and the challenging the growth. Well, it can be as simple as, when Lauren was talking about that tutor taking the child out of the room just talking, we know that girls will say, you ask them a question, they'll say, I don't know, right? And then, but you have to be ready to say, what if you did know? Like, what would it sound like if you did know? Or, and sometimes we end up asking yes or no questions, which we know that doesn't really elicit a conversation. But when somebody says, I always say, I always tell a story about, well, tell me one thing that, that happened to you that made you happy today. Nothing. Well, what could have made you happy today? So it's teaching adults how to ask those questions too. So it's not only the skills, and maybe it's a skill, but it's asking questions and being curious. And I think that's the mindset, the mentoring mindset of, you do have something to offer, by the way, but you don't even have to do that. You just have to ask questions and listen. And then listen to what the child says, listen to what the adult says, and say, I hear you. It's like, it's having a conversation, but it's such a strong thing to have. It's a relationship builder. So I appreciate, Lily, that you just talked about those for the adults in the room, which are all adults in the room, as to how to be an intentional mentor. We all need to be mentors to youth. They need us.
Mm-hmm.
And just to double down on that a little bit, Deb, I really love your comments. And so being an intentional mentor, but going back to what Lily said about the advocacy side of it, the things that we're doing is we're listening. First, we're asking questions. So we're asking our community, what do you need? And then we're listening. And then the other thing that we're doing is we're taking action. And the action sometimes is communicating out to Lily's team in terms of what we think are the policies we should get behind as a collective body. Some of it is advocating at the school level, advocating with parents and letting parents know what's going on with our community around, the different things that are coming up for our girls and so forth. And so those are the 3 things that we're doing, as Strong Women, Strong Girls. But I think what's most important is that listening piece, because as Deb was saying, ask the question, come from a place of curiosity, but actually listening with unbiased mindset and not trying to make assumptions about what you're hearing, but take it for face value for what it actually is. And then thinking about how you can show up and provide impact from your perspective, whether you're an individual or part of an organization. Just being very careful and thoughtful about that, because oftentimes when you're dealing with different populations, it's important that you make sure that you're hearing them in the place that they're coming from. And then again, taking action in a way that shows up best for you or shows up best for your organization. Because the truth is, and like I said earlier, we are all in this together, and we're not one individual or one organization that's going to be the be all and end all to this pandemic. We have to get through this collectively, and through mentoring relationships, we can make sure that we lift up, the women and girl population so that we can all survive this together.
I think what you just said about bias is so critical in a mentoring relationship and in all relationships. And even when I think about, when we talk about systemic racism in organizations, like you could say that, oh, of course, Big Sister isn't, doesn't have systemic racism because we've always been a social justice organization. But then you look at what is systemic racism. It hits healthcare, of course, it hits education, it hits, why the equity pay gap and all that. However, it hits culture too. And some of those insidious things that you don't realize that you're doing as an organization, I'll say like Big Sister, and unless you really pay attention and like you say, you're listening, not so like, they say that the brain looks for evidence for what it needs, for what it believes to be true. You've got to suspend that judgment. And that is not easy in the bias. So even like when you think about in hiring, for example, you can't look on social media. You can't Google somebody. You can't do that when you have a resume come in, because you're going to be biased on what you see on that social media. You got to be careful on everything. So as you're talking about mentoring, you're talking about relationships, you're talking about every single thing that's happening in a culture of an organization that you might unintentionally do. Of course, it's the right intent, but if you're not doing, anti-racism work, if you're not really thinking about your own organization and yourself personally in your journey to be anti-racist, then you're going to miss a whole bunch of stuff. So I appreciate that you brought up bias in that, because it's so critical to a mentoring relationship with a child, that you have to suspend judgment and not put your values on that child. You have to respect and honor that. And I will stop.
No, and Deb, thanks for lifting that up. And Lauren, feel free to jump in. I think it's part of it is being mindful. It's really taking the time to understand your privilege, my privilege, and how it shows up. And as a leader, it's also understanding that it is a journey. It's a tough journey, but you can't be afraid of those conversations, because frankly, it's not a nice to have. When we're talking about young people in our programs, the vast majority are Black and brown young people. And so then how can we be mindful and be of service if we don't have the humility to sit back and understand how deep these inequity, how deep these issues that they're confronting go in our society. So I really appreciate you, Deb. Lauren, jump in.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. And we've done some work at the State House and also lobbying for line items to help support our families and mentoring program as well. But definitely bringing in the whole DEI, knowledge, and kind of being able to take our company and sort of break it apart, including hiring. So it's something that we have actually started recently implementing, as Deb said, that we've been a program of building relationships for so long, but it doesn't mean that we took a real good look at how things were, how to dissect everything in our organization to make sure that DEI was sort of intrinsic and in all aspects of our program. So recently we've had board meetings, and we've formed a committee with the board, and now forming a staff committee. But our very first day of new hires coming in, we have new employees coming in. We had a meeting to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it was just such a great space that we had. It really worked well. We talked about vocabulary and things that stood out to them. We talked about stereotype and implicit bias. We took that test that Harvard administered, and we kind of talked about that. We talked about, your family, and how in your family trying to protect you, what have they taught you about bias or stereotypes, in their way of trying to protect you as a child, and bringing you up in a safe environment. So I really love that we're all on board at looking at the organization in every aspect. Hiring is a big one, and getting out there, getting the listing out there, posting in different various areas instead of just one venue, so that we could reach out to people of color. So there's so much that we're learning. We're bringing in other organizations like Vision to really work with us to, help us train, staff and continue the talk, because it's something that you have to keep doing. You're working with kids and families, you're working with partners, and we'd like to make sure that we present ourselves in the most equitable way possible. So just ongoing continued work.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thanks to all of you. I think I'm being told there was one question in the chat, but all I saw was, can you say those again, which I did. Was there one that I missed?
Yeah, so the question is, first of all, there's lots of love for you all in the chat. So your social media postings after this is going to skyrocket. Are there any specific tactics or communication styles that anyone has found may help young women and girls talk about self-esteem, their confidence, or mental health? These are vulnerable topics to open up about.
Oh, I missed it. I'm sorry I missed that. We have 2 minutes. So Deb and Natalie, who wants to take that one, or Lauren? I know.
The only thing that's showing up for me quickly, and Deb, I'll let you have the last word, but curiosity. And you already said it, Deb. If you come to the conversation from a place of curiosity, that opens the door for you to really get in and have that person or that child or individual speak authentically from their heart. Keep asking those questions and don't let them give you one-word answers.
Amen.
I love it. Well, listen, Natalie, Lauren, Deb, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you to the Boston Women's Foundation, to the Women's Foundation of Boston. I renamed it, and to everybody who attended. Really appreciate it. It was rich. There's a lot of work to do, but I'm so happy that I get to be a part of a group like all of you who are trying to serve young people. So appreciate that, and thanks again.
Thanks, Lily.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.